Dear friends, here I present to you the 47th episode of When I Cannot Pray Talks on Prayer. In the last episode, we introduced the faculty of will. This is the core of our soul, where true union with God in prayer really takes place. The will is closely associated with the appetites and passions, is clear through our daily experiences. When we see something very attractive, we try to possess it. When we desire a thing, our will is gradually moved towards that particular object. Appetites are closely related to passions. In certain passages, St. John of the Cross elaborates on the main passions and considers them as 4 in number. They are joy, hope, sorrow, fear. In the book of Ascent of Mount Carmel, book 2, chapter 21, paragraph 8. These 4 passions are strictly in relationship with one another. In their operation, they can exert dominion over the faculties. They are memory, intellect, and will, and keep them as prisoners. The entire soul, the will, and the other faculties, the intellect, memory, and the imagination and fantasy, also go wherever one of these passions go, like joy, hope, fear, sorrow. It is evident through this text of St. John of the Cross that is taken from Ascent of Mount Carmel, book 3, chapter 16, paragraph 6, that the passions and, for that matter, even the inordinate appetites can grossly impoverish the freedom and liberty of the will mediated through other spiritual faculties. Referring directly to the inordinate appetites, St. John of the Cross affirms that they arrest the soul's growth towards God. The inordinate appetites cause twofold damage to the soul. First of all, they weary, torment, darken, defile, and weaken. Then they deprive the soul of God's Spirit. For example, if one is attached to wealth, money, lust, or sex, then these appetites cause torment, darkness, defilement, and gradually a person becomes weak in reasoning and in their determination. In the initial stages, certainly there is some kind of pleasure. The only way out of these passions and appetites is the role of the will, which can begin to tame these passions and appetites. Therefore, without the active collaboration of the will, passions and inordinate appetites can impede the whole process of spiritual growth. Some of these habitual imperfections are the common habit of being very talkative, a small attachment one never really desires to conquer. For example, an attachment to a person, to clothing, to a book, or to a space, or to the way food is prepared, and to other trifling conversations and little satisfactions in tasting, knowing, and hearing things, and so on. Being curious about others' achievements, their work, their relationship, etc. In this modern world, we can enumerate a number of inordinate appetites, like being victim of pornography, the modern day problem as it is available so easily through mass media. Then we can speak of slavery to alcohol, substance abuse. These appetites need to be reined in to make progress in our spiritual life. Any of these habitual imperfections to which there is attachment is as harmful to progress in virtue as the daily commission of many other imperfections and sporadic venial sins that do not result from a bad habit. As long as these attachments remain, it is impossible to make progress in prayer. Even though the imperfections may be very small, they can pull us down. For example, when we go for prayer, if we are attached to a person or a particular desire, we always are there attached to that. According to St. John of the Cross and St. Teresa of Avila, the effort at overcoming all attachments is stimulated through the positive effort at imitating Christ and His teaching. In order to be successful in this imitation of Christ, we need to renounce and remain empty of any sensory satisfaction and joy that is not purely for the honor and glory of God. This renunciation is nothing but orienting our will towards God no matter what we see, experience, and feel. Doing this out of pure love for Jesus Christ enables us to arrive at a state of constant, unperturbed peace. In the life of Jesus, He had no other gratification, nor did He have any other desire except to fulfill His Father's will, which He called His meat and food. At times, when people are desperate to come out of their deep attachments, they try to begin a spiritual renewal through a retreat. Well, this is a very good beginning. This step can greatly contribute to stopping the unruly march of the appetites. But this step requires a follow-up in the following days after the spiritual renewal retreat. The active and detached functioning of the will necessarily brings order and unity of purpose into the whole human person with consequent peace, tranquility, and integration. This order in the very core of the soul helps it to love Him with all its might. That's why the Lord said, love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind and strength, and then love your neighbor as you love yourself. Therefore, what we say is the will is energized with love. Love is the tonic for the will. All the appetites, passions, affections, and the will itself come to perfection in charity. Seated in the will, charity directs all sensory and spiritual appetites towards God. Where there is true love of God, love of self and of one's own things find no entry. Dark Night of the Soul, Book 2, Chapter 21, Paragraph 10. God is love. Provoked by this divine love, we seek only His honor and glory. We will live in perfect harmony with God's will and with ourselves, with the power of love. We can choose to love. This choosing to love is nothing but an attitude to give ourselves to others, and finally to love itself, that is God. The eternal love is constantly drawing us to itself. However, we can also reject this movement of love. We can turn our love, the driving force of our nature, on ourselves and become centers not of love but of strife and egoism. Self-love is the root of all sin, and it is deep in us all. Our whole life is a battle between these two forces: the love of God, the infinite, the eternal, the transcendent for which we are made, and then love for ourselves, not for our true self, which is found in God, but for our ego, the self which tries to attract all love to itself and refuses to surrender itself. Every creature receives its being from the love of God and is urged to communicate itself in love. Only the will can make an option to this type of love. Senses are capable of sense love, and will is capable of sublime love, that is God. Now, love is the only measure of everything that we do or experience. God experience in prayer is the result of the experience of love in our daily life. Where there is no love, there can hardly be any God experience. To confine love to the psychic and physical plane is to profane it. It is literally to put it outside the temple. Ultimately, it is only the love of God that prompts us to give ourselves back in return for the love we have received. That is why all love, from the love of atoms to the love of man, is holy. It is always a reflection of the love of God. Love to be real, dear friends, needs the proper education and orientation of the will. Every expression of love need not be a mature expression. When the soul is less integrated, the expression becomes weaker and at times even selfish and egocentric. When the senses are involved without the guidance of the intellect and precisely of the will, love can be sensual. Only spiritual love can reach us to the divine center of love. So that is what we understand by this power of the will. Dear friends, the authentic prayer depends on our will to be passive through loving surrender to God. We must allow God to direct our will. We are helpless when our will needs to be cured and oriented. It is in being passive that we are able to contact God. God cures it. Our being is not to be enriched merely by activity or sentimental experiences as such. Everything in prayer depends on the quality of our acts and our selfless, God-oriented experiences. A multitude of badly performed actions and experiences only half-lived exhaust and deplete our being. By doing things badly, we make ourselves less real. This growing unreality cannot but make us unhappy and fill us with a sense of guilt. These are the times then when, in order to keep ourselves in existence and to be authentic, we simply have to sit back for a while and do nothing and examine our conscience. And for a man who has let himself be drawn completely by his selfish activity, nothing is more difficult than to sit still and rest, doing nothing at all. The very act of resting is the hardest and the most heroic act we can ever perform. Prayer is a way helps us to combat the vice of inordinate, selfish, and disoriented activity. Prayer, as we have affirmed, is watching in quiet without indulging in result-oriented selfish activity. This attitude helps the will to stay still and educate itself for the passive reception of God's intervention through loving awareness. Therefore, dear friends, today this reflection must help us in some way come closer to the experience of prayer. When we really pray in that real silence, God begins to open our hearts. He will touch the core of our soul, because it is the will that must be energized with love. When that is energized, everything else, like the activity of our external senses and our intellect, our memory, our imagination and fantasy, all begin to march towards one goal, that is God experience and the love of God. Let us give a try, and certainly our prayer will be a marvelous, beautiful experience that can truly give us the inner strength to face any difficult situation in our life. God bless you.